real confusing. They've messed up the outline, all right? And so I've got to clean it up. There's another term that we're going to see in a couple of slides from now. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and show it to you. It's right there. Appurtenances, right there. That should have been on that page we were just looking at. So jot it down so you can see how to spell it. And where this should have been in the outline was back here, right here. So we put another bullet point and we had rights. And if you combine those two terms, improvements and rights, there is a term for that, and that term is appurtenances. So the definition of appurtenance, I'm going to give it to you. The definition of an appurtenance is any right, privilege, or improvement, permanently attached to the land. Any right, privilege, or improvement permanently attached to the land. The key word here is permanently. That is an appurtenance. So, if I was to say to you, what is the term that includes land plus appurtenances? What would be the answer? The answer to that would not be real estate. It'd be real property, right? Because again, the key word they left out here was rights. And improvements and rights are part of appurtenances. So these three are land, the next two would be appurtenances. So if I said to you, what is the definition of land plus appurtenances? The answer to that would be real property. That might be at your birthday. Land plus appurtenances equals real property. Land plus appurtenances equals real property. We gonna pod like it's your birthday. Sip Bacardi like it's your birthday. Knowing the definition of land, the surface, what's above it, what's below it, might be your birthday. The definition of appurtenances, right? Any improvement, right, or privilege permanently attached to the land, it's your birthday. All right, now what we're going to discuss are different types of appurtenances. And I wish that was the heading that would be above this word fixtures. And instead of this being a 3, I wish it would be a 1. I wish this would be a 2. Because that's what we're discussing here, are different types of appurtenances. So if you want to make a new heading right there and write different types of appurtenances, and then number them 1, 2, 3, so forth and so on. Because that's how it should have been done, even though it wasn't. I kind of mentioned this was going to happen to you. I'm just sorry it happened right off the beginning. I wished it wouldn't happen off the beginning, but that's real confusing. And we need to have a good understanding of what we're talking about here. So these are different types of appurtenances. So number 1 is called fixtures. Okay? Definition of fixtures used to be personal property, but now real. All right. Now we have a definition now to real property. Definition is land plus appurtenances. I also mentioned to you earlier that there's only 2 types of property. There's going to be real property and personal property. So if there's only 2 types of property, and they have an item and they ask you about this item on a test, and you look at it and you say, well, it's not land or appurtenances, then by default, doesn't it have to be personal property? The answer to that is yes, because there's only 2 types of property. So I know it sounds corny to say this, and it really kind of does, but I'm going to tell you it's its best definition. The best definition of personal property, y'all, is any property that's not real. So another way to say that is if something is not land plus appurtenances, then by default it has to be personal property. So a fixture is something that used to be personal property but has become real property. All right? It's your birthday. Ooh, it's your birthday. Big time it's your birthday. It used to be personal property, but now it's real property. You may also recall I've taught you the definition of a deed. A deed is a document used to transfer title to real property, not personal property, but real property. I've mentioned to you, I haven't had you write it down yet, but the document used to transfer title to personal property is called a bill of sale. You have typically heard that called a receipt out in the real world. A receipt, when you go buy a bag of potato chips at the store and they tear off the little thing off the cash register and hand it to you, the little piece of paper, that's a receipt. Well, that's a type of bill of sale, right? So let's think this thing through because I love their little picture right here of a ceiling fan. So when you buy a ceiling fan down at Lowe's and you take it up to the counter and you pay for it, do they give you a deed or do they give you a receipt? They give you a receipt, which is a type of bill of sale. So I know that the fan, at that point, that fan is what? Personal property. However, then I take the fan home and I take it out of the box and then I screw it into the ceiling in my bedroom. So, what have I done? I have permanently attached that ceiling fan to the ceiling of the house. So, that ceiling fan used to be personal property, but now it's become attached to the house, so it becomes real property. So, the ceiling fan is a fixture. Used to be personal, but now is real property. Okay? So next they say test of a fixture. So how do we determine whether something is a fixture or not? And so they're going to give you four different things that we look at to determine whether something's a fixture or not. However, on a test of these four, there's one more important than the other three. And they don't put it in good order for you, but on a test it matters. All right? So before I put these up here, don't just start writing them down because we want to put them in a order of importance. And so I'm going to tell you how it should work. At the top, number one right here should be, and they even left out a keyword, a written agreement. A written agreement. Okay? That will determine whether something is a fixture or not. Because if I say it's a fixture in a written agreement, then it's a fixture. We're not going to change that. Why? Because it's in a written agreement. All right? Now you might notice the second one is called method of attachment. So do you remember a minute ago I said I screwed in the ceiling fan with screws into the ceiling. That's how I attach the ceiling. So it's method of how it's attached. It's with screws. Y'all, it's not up there with Scotch tape, right? If it's Scotch tape, it's probably personal property. But if it's with screws into the wood, into the studs behind the wall, to the studs in the ceiling joists, right? Then it's probably a fixture, right? See the difference between how it's installed, its method of attachment? All right. But what if this? What if it's screwed into the ceiling, but in my written agreement, I'm saying that I'm taking the ceiling fan with me when I sell the house? So is the ceiling fan now you see the dilemma? I've got a written agreement that says it's personal property, but its method of attachment would actually come under what? It would come under a fixture. So which one is the answer? And the answer to that question is the written agreement. That's why it should have been on top. That's why a written agreement. You might want to say a written agreement trumps everything else. because the rest of these, the method of attachment, its adaptability, the relationship of the parties, none of that stuff even matters if you've got a written agreement. You know, do y'all watch the judge shows? The only one worth watching is Judge Mathis. God help us all. Judge Judy, just thank God there's not a lot of that out there because she's wrong a lot of the times. Judge Mathis is right just about every time. And I don't know if you notice when you watch the shows, but they do a little TV stuff, for humor and stuff. But then, if let's say it's a landlord tenant case, the first thing Judge Mathis asks for, let me see the contract. He's not going to get into what did you say and what did he say and what did she say and who's a witness. None of that stuff even matters if there's a contract. He's going to say, let me see the contract. And if it's in that contract, that's how the judge is going to rule. Period. End of story. They're not going to get into he said and she said and I might have would have done this and all this other stuff. That don't get into none of that. Let me see the contract. So, this written agreement. Now, what I'm getting ready to tell you next is a real world issue more so than a test world. In my opinion, it ought to be on a test because I think it's extremely important for you to understand this as a real estate agent, even though they don't test it on you, but they should test it on you. But I'm going to go ahead and tell it to you anyway because there's some real world stuff I'm going to tell you about because you need to know. So, this written agreement, when we're under the fixtures here, there's actually a term for it here in Georgia, and it's called a seller's property disclosure form. And even though that's probably not on a test, it should be, and you should know about it, and you definitely need to know about it as a real estate agent. It's called a seller's property disclosure form. When you go out and you're talking to someone about selling to represent them in selling their home, and they say yes, and you sign a contract for them to hire your firm to represent them in the sale of the home, you're going to have them fill out this seller's property disclosure form. And what's in it is anything that are or what are called latent defects. And Georgia, even though you might be selling the property as is with all faults, you are still required by law to disclose any known defects about the property, latent defects, which means hidden defects. You are still required by law, even selling it as is. Okay? So, where do you make these disclosures is in this form called the seller's property disclosure form. Also, one of the pages of this, like a 5-page form, the last page of the form is about every type of device and appliance known to man. And it has a little box beside it. And if the seller is going to keep that, let's say one of the things on it is a refrigerator. God, you always got refrigerator, washer, dryer, microwave, the light switch covers. I mean, it's got everything on it. And if the seller checks the box beside light switch covers, that means even though the light switch covers are screwed into the wall, that means the seller's going to take them with it. And so buyers, before they make an offer to buy the home, they will look at the seller's disclosure statement, right, to see what is a fixture and what is not a fixture. Because if it's in that document and the box is checked, then it's personal property. They're taking it with them. So buyers need to be looking at these before they make an offer on the property, and sellers have to fill these out and then present these to a buyer before there's an offer made on the property. Okay? So your written agreement is actually called a seller's property disclosure statement. And it's very important for you, the real estate agent, to tell them, make sure you're honest on this. Make sure you're putting down what you want to take. Because if it's not on there that you're taking it, it's staying with the house. So make sure you're putting on here anything that you want to take with the property. I'll tell you a big item about that is, and that's anything outside. I mean, you'd be surprised, y'all. People dig up bushes and take their bushes with them. You can't do that. Not unless you said you were going to do that in that written agreement. William, you have a question. What is it?
I just wanted to share a really quick story. I'll make it short, but I used to be a realtor 20 years ago, and I was sued because this couple tried to say that I was fraudulent in something, but because I put the information on my seller's disclosure statement, I ended up winning my case. It cost me $50,000 in legal fees, and 4 years later, but my attorney said because I wrote this one sentence on my disclosure statement is what saved me. And then 4 years later, after all the depositions and everything, the judge pointed to that one sentence on my disclosure statement because I included it, and that's what won me my case. I just wanted to, if anyone wants to know more details, I'm going to share.
No, God, no, you can't stop there, William. Tell us what the statement was that you put in the disclosure.
Small cracks in wall, in basement, and garage.
Oh, so you were the seller, not the real estate agent.
I was both. I was both the agent and the seller. I was selling my own home.
Gotcha.
And, okay. And I was remodeling my basement, so 2/3 of the wall was covered with paneling, and 1/3 was not covered. So I was thinking, when you walk into the basement, you're going to see the cracks in the wall. So I almost didn't even put that sentence on my disclosure statement. It was like an afterthought. I thought, let me just write this one sentence down here, and that's the only thing that was on my disclosure statement. But the couple they said that I tried to defraud them because I had receipts from 3 years ago from where I had been working on the basement, trying to build a mother-in-law suite and all that. So part of the wall was covered with paneling, but one part was not. So when you walk in the basement, you can obviously see the crack. So I wasn't even going to put the sentence on the disclosure statement, but luckily for me, I did because they were trying to sue me for $100,000, and I didn't have E&O insurance because of other things that went on with my broker, which I can go into later.
Yeah, we'll go into that much later.
Yeah, but I just wanted to share that. If anybody wants more details, I'll give them.
Okay, that sounds good. And so, what his point is that y'all, the seller disclosure statement, this written agreement we've been talking about, is very, very important. So you want to go over it with your sellers if you're going to be the listing agent representing the seller. You want to go over it with them to make sure that they didn't leave anything out and that they did it right. Now, really, the part we're talking about right now, more so than defects, which cracks could be a defect, what we're really talking about more so here are the items that are either staying or leaving with the house. Because our heading right now is fixtures, which is in the same document. But thank you for sharing that with us, William. Patrick, you've got your hand up. What you got?
Yeah, hey Diddy. I had a situation similar to what you're talking about where I was buying a property here in Georgia, and the owner did not have on the seller's disclosure statement that he was taking the washer and dryer. So after we closed, he called back and said, "Hey, when are you going to pay me for the washer and dryer?" And I was like, "What, pay you for what washer and dryer?" And in good faith, I went on and sent him $700. But are you saying I really didn't have to?
Lord, no. He didn't have it checked that he was taking it with him, and he left them there. Did y'all have any kind of verbal agreement that you were going to pay him for the washer and dryer?
I had the agreement with a small fraction of a conversation with the agent, and I said, well, ask him if he's going to leave the washer and dryer in. And the agent was like, yeah, I'll ask him about it. And we just never came back around to it. And so the agent didn't pass it back off to me about the agreement of the washer and dryer. But it wasn't.
If you took that to court, you'd have probably won, and you'd have probably had a free washer and dryer. And it probably would have him to take you to court to sue you to get his washer and dryer back. So you had all the rights in that. Why, y'all? Because it wasn't in writing. Now, can you see about proving the point about things being in writing? You have both sides now. You've got two stories. You have the story about the cracks in the wall where he did put it in writing, which saved him, right? Then you got this guy that bought a house there was a washer and dryer there. In his agreement, it wasn't supposed to be there. Then he got a call from the seller saying he wanted to be paid for his washer and dryer. He would have won that case. Why? Because it wasn't in writing. We put everything in writing. And by the way, you had a bad real estate agent that didn't follow through about that washer and dryer. Any idiot real estate agent would have known this is going to be a potential problem. This is going to be a potential lawsuit. And it's going to be, that means he's going to court along with you. Y'all, you don't ever want to go to court. Just the word court costs you money. And then whatever commission you made on the deal, you're going to pay that in attorney's fees. Easy. Not to mention your time. Okay? Now, I'm going to take one more here, and then we're going to have to move on. Gainey?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So if you're a seller selling a property and and the person that has listed you as your agent don't tell you about the cracks, let's just say IE, and you don't notice them.
Whoa. The real estate agent has no obligation whatsoever to talk to you about cracks.
No. I'm talking about if you're
talk to your agent.
Yeah, I'm talking about if you are the agent for the person that's listing to sell, and that person that's listing to sell, and you're the agent, and they don't tell you about their cracks.
Oh, okay.
So how would you be penalized if you're the agent on record?
Did you know about the cracks?
No, if they didn't tell you.
If you don't know about the cracks, then how can you be held responsible for it?
Okay, because I was just listening to the story before about how someone almost sued him, and he was lucky enough to put that on there.
Well, he was the seller.
Yeah, okay.
Take away that he had a real estate license had nothing to do with the story.
Okay.
Now, it will later on in our course, but not now, because I'm going to confuse everybody that I'm talking to if I try to go too far with this at this point. The point we need to get across right now is, y'all, what is a fixture and what is not a fixture. All right, that's what we're at right here. Defects are going to be taught in book 2, and a little bit more also in the national section, and it will be extremely important. It's just if we go into it now, it's a little bit too much for where I want to go now. I just want to stay on fixtures right now. Okay. So written agreement is where we're going to list what stays and what leaves with the property. But then the question may be, what if there is no written agreement? Then these other 3 come into play. Because we just said a written agreement trumps everything. So it doesn't matter. If it's in a written agreement, it's done. But what if there's not a written agreement? So a good example of that might be a bookcase. Bookcases sometimes are built into the wall. Sometimes they're just standing on the floor beside the wall. So we look at it and we say, well, what about this bookcase? Does it stay or leave? Well, what if there's nothing in writing? What if we didn't put anything in writing? Then all of a sudden the seller moves out of the house, the buyer moves in. He was expecting to see his bookcase, and his bookcase isn't there. So how is that going to turn out? Well, let me first say that I don't know how anything is going to turn out in a court of law. All right? So I can't give you a 100% answer to anything that happens in a courtroom, because nobody can. All right? Nobody can. However, I can give you how it might happen on a test. All right? So let's think that thing through. There was nothing in writing. The bookcase was sitting on the floor, not attached to the wall. How do you think the court would answer that? Is it a fixture or not? The answer to that question is, y'all, it's not a fixture, it's personal property. Why? Because how was it attached? Look at this first one, method of attachment. It was just sitting there. It wasn't even attached at all. Therefore, the court would rule that that's personal property and that it's not a fixture. However, what if it was screwed into the studs behind the wall, right? The court then would rule that it was a fixture. So how is it attached matters. Let me give you a real good one that you'll see out in the real world quite often. And it happened somewhere along about 20 years ago, roughly. When builders would build a house, the mirror in the spare bathrooms, that was actually attached to the wall. But about 20 years ago, and I don't know why, builders, when they build a house, they wouldn't even put a mirror in the spare bathrooms. And if they did, it was not attached to the wall. It was up there like a picture hanger, like a picture on your wall, with a little, hook behind it, and you have the what do you call the string or whatever that goes on the hook. And so that we would think that a picture would be what? Personal property. But if the mirror was attached to the studs in the wall, it'd be a fixture, correct? And so what I always do when I'm walking through a house and I'm talking to a seller about, you have a beautiful home and let's look at your house. When I get to the mirrors in spare bathrooms, I touch them and I see if they move. If they move, then we want to make sure and ask the sellers, hey, this mirror right here, are you taking it or is it staying with the house? Because you got to be real careful with things like that. Bookcases. And then bookcases, you got to see how are they attached, and then you have a conversation with them. Those dadgum bushes out in the yard. Are you going to take any of these bushes? What about these roses? What about this? What about that? And we're going to flag this if you're going to take it with you, so that buyers will know that it's not going to be here. And then we're going to also put it in our written agreement. Therefore, we won't have to worry about how it's attached. But if there is no written agreement and it does go to court, Judge Mathis, one of the things he would look at would be, how is it attached? What is its method of attachment? Another thing Judge Mathis would look at if there's no written agreement would be adaptability. In other words, is that item easily adaptable at another location? For example, your house key to get in your house, right? Even though that's, I can throw that across the room, so it's not attached to anything, is it? But can you adapt that key at another location? And the answer to that is no. Therefore, that house key is considered a fixture, is considered real property. Why? Because it is not easily adaptable at another location. So its adaptability matters. Give you another example of that. Some windows you can buy down at Lowe's or Home Depot. Other windows have to be specially made for a home, depending on the sizes, right? If you can buy a window down at Lowe's, guess what? We call those standard windows, and they come with standard blinds and standard drapes. So blinds and drapes, they can be adapted at another, easily adaptable at another location because they're standard size. But if you had your blinds or drapes custom made, those are not easily adaptable. They need to stay with the home. Those would be called fixtures. So are the items easily adaptable or not? So here's what I want you to write down. House keys, remote controls. In other words, your remote control to open your garage door, is that real property? Is that fixture? Is that personal property? Y'all, that's real property. That fits that garage door. Don't fit other garage doors. Your remote control to your ceiling fan, that's real property. So house keys, remote controls, those are fixtures, real property. And then relationship of the parties, that would be some separate agreement that the parties have. And so those agreements, the question's going to be, are they in writing or not? And so I'll let you read about that in the Blue Book. I doubt this part is on the test, but it's there, and I'll let you read about it in the Blue Book. Things that I let you read about in the Blue Book, y'all, I go through that real quickly because typically you're not going to find those on the test. I said typically, I did not say always. So I do want you to read it. There's going to be other things I'm going to tell you don't even read. They're NTR. If I ever tell you anything NTR, then I don't even want you to read it. So those are the tests to determine whether something is a fixture or not. Now remember, our heading up here should have been different types of appurtenances. And the first one would have been fixtures. The second type of appurtenance is called fructus naturalis. Hardwick, you got your hand up. What you got?
Yes, I just wanted to ask really quickly concerning the relationship.
Wait a minute. If you got something going on in the background?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me mute it. Okay.
There you
I
go.
apologize. So I was wondering about the relationship of parties. I just wanted a little more clarity on the relationship of parties.
I'm going to let you read about it in your textbook.
Oh,
it
okay.
basically just means a separate agreement. In other words,
Okay.
the two got off with each other and made their own agreement. You don't want that to happen in the real world. That's why I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it. Okay? Because number one, I don't think it's on the test. Number two, you don't want to let this happen in the real world. What you don't want to have happen in the real world is your buyers and sellers to get together when you're not there.
Okay.
You'll start making agreements, and the next thing you know, you're going to have that washer and dryer situation. I can't remember the gentleman's name that talked to us about it a few minutes ago. And then you're going to be brought into the middle of it. So you never let your client get with the other client and let them talk one-on-one. Ever.
Okay.
I've got stories on that coming up later on in the course. And they're nightmares. Every one of them will be a nightmare. Okay?
Basically they're just making their own side.
Yeah, it's just a separate agreement that where they're making about whether something's staying or leaving. And
what page
should be in the book.
Oh, okay, it's not important.
13. If you ever want to know where I am, look down in the bottom right down here, page 13.
Oh, yes, okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Appurtenances. So the second type of appurtenance called fructus naturalis. Y'all, I just want you to write these are natural appurtenances. That's what they are. Put examples. Trees, bushes. Write the word perennials. Perennials are plants that they die off in the winter, but then they come back the next spring. Not to be confused with annuals. Annuals you plant and then they die and they don't come back. Perennials, you plant, they go, for example, hosta. When it gets cold, your hosta dies. And so you don't see it all winter long, but then in the spring it pops back up out of the ground. Tulips. Tulips die off in the winter, but then next spring they come back. So fructus naturals are types of appurtenances. They are types of real property. Okay, they're part of real property, meaning that they are appurtenances, and they stay with the property. Now, I did say a few minutes ago that I take my sellers outside, and I walk outside with them, and I say, "Do you have anything out here that you got planted that you want to take with you?" And if they say yes, then we're going to put it in that agreement, what it is, and we're also going to put a tape on it, flagging, so that the buyers will know it won't be there when they move in. Because you never want to end up in court, y'all. You never want to end up there. All right? All right. The third type of appurtenance, water rights. Okay? And they've got some blueprint here that I don't like, but I'll put it up there in case you're taking. I would definitely take notes on this if I were you. And by the way, the book has this in it, so the book's done a pretty good job with this. So water rights, the first type is called riparian rights, and I'm going to give you a good definition. A good definition of riparian rights is property bordering flowing water. Property bordering flowing, and the key word for test purposes is flowing. It's your birthday, by the way. Property bordering flowing water. So let me do this real fast. So flowing water, what are we talking about there? We're talking about a creek, right? A creek, the water flows in a creek. So if this is Mr. A's property and this is Mr. B's property, then property that borders this flowing water, they have a riparian right to the water. Okay? In other words, Mr. A has a right to use the water, and so does Mr. B. It's called a reasonable right. And so they own this property, and the type of appurtenance that they have is a riparian water right. However, on a test, not only do you need to know what is the definition of riparian rights, which is property bordering flowing water, you also need to know, okay, so where exactly is the property line between Mr. A and Mr. B? Well, that's going to matter as to whether or not this water is navigable or not. All right. So first thing we need to know is what is the definition of navigable? Navigable means commercial traffic. Creeks, for example, and streams, y'all, they don't have any commercial traffic. Commercial traffic means that you are shipping items up and down a river, for example. In other words, it's commercial transportation. That's what navigable means, commercial transportation. And if there's commercial transportation, like barges on a river, you've probably seen that when they put things on these big boats and it goes up and down the river, like the Mississippi River, the Tennessee River. Tennessee River is navigable, right? So to answer the question, where exactly is the property line between Mr. A and Mr. B, is going to first determine whether or not this water is navigable or not. So streams and creeks are definitely non-navigable. It's not deep enough for there to be a barge to ship goods up and down the creek. Okay? So creeks and streams are non-navigable, and the property line would be, if it is non-navigable, would be the middle of the waterway. So Mr. A would own to here, and Mr. B would own to here. The middle of the waterway would be the line. That would be the property line between the two owners. So the way to write that in your notes is, if non-navigable, the property line is the middle of the waterway. If non-navigable, the property line is the middle of the waterway. Okay, then the next question is going to be, what if it is navigable? In other words, what if this is the Mississippi River? So what if the property is navigable? All right, then where is the property line? The property line then is what is called the high water mark, H-I-G-H, watermark. The property is the high water mark. If you want to know what is that for real world purposes, the high water mark, the best example of a high water mark is a 100-year floodplain. 100-year floodplain. I don't think they'll have a 100-year floodplain on a test, but if they did, that is an example of a high water mark. So remember, this water now is navigable. It's the Mississippi River. So Mr. A would own up to the high water mark, his high water mark, which would be here. Mr. B would own to his high water mark, which would be here. But then the next question is going to be, well, then who owns in between the high water marks, right? In other words, who owns between here and here? And who owns there is the government. And they usually refer to the government as the Corps, C-O-R-P, the Corps of Engineers. It's a type of government agency, Corps of Engineers, CORP. Corps of Engineers. So, here's the way to write this in your notes. If the water is navigable, property owners own to the high water mark. If the property is navigable, owners own to the high water mark. In between is owned by the Corps of Engineers. In between is owned by the Corps of Engineers. And then put in parentheses the word government. Dia.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to ask, how can they build on that? Like if they want to put a dock out there,
they will have to get a approval from the Corps of Engineers.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
That's exactly the way it works. Maddox.
Yes. I was just trying to make sure I get the whole definition again. You said if the water is navigable,
then owners own to the high water mark. Owners own to the high water mark. In between is owned by the Corps of Engineers. Y'all, we're going to have to go faster. I know it's the first day. You're kind of getting used to it, but we're going to have to go faster to finish. Okay? Let's see. So that is riparian. I do want to make you a little quick announcement here. There is a whole lot of lightning and thunder going on outside my home right now. And I mentioned this early this morning, but I want to mention it again because I had some of you come in late. And so should this thing go down, which means that my power goes out or something of that nature, then that means yours is going to go away too. And so what you'll have to do is just keep checking back in. You have to go into your email that you got originally from Barney Fletcher and sign back in just like you signed in this morning when you came into the system or when you came back from lunch, however you did it. Okay? So I just wanted to be careful that because that could happen. Because there is some thundering going on outside. I hear it. All right. That was good. We did good. All right. So we're still talking about water rights. And so riparian rights meant that the property borders flowing water. Remember the key word was flowing. The next type is called littoral rights. And that is property bordering non-flowing water. And so where they have lake or ocean, I think that is a very good example. Extremely good example. So you own property that borders Lake Lanier. That's the lake that provides water to Atlanta. It's a big lake. In Marietta, they have Lake Altoona. Okay? So you own property that borders the lake. So where is your property line in reference to the water? Within in this situation, because this is property bordering this is property bordering non-flowing water, right? Then you always own to the high water mark. You would own to the 100-year floodplain. And the lady that asked me a minute ago, what if you wanted to build a dock out into the water? Then you're going to have to get Corps of Engineer approval. Because who owns past that high water mark into the water is the Corps of Engineers. And so you want to build a dock out onto the water, you're free to do that, and it's your lumber, it's just not your dock. Because who owns the dock is the Corps of Engineer, because it's not even on your property. That's why you have to get their approval to build that dock. The lumber's yours, but the dock itself is not, because it's not on your property. Dia.
Second question. We actually live on a lake down here in Georgia, and we own into that lake. We own about 35 feet into it. So it's actually deeded to us.
Not on your test, you don't.
Okay. Thank you. I was just wondering. I was thinking, well, that's not okay. That's fine. Thanks.
Yep. Got that. We got that cleaned up real fast, like. Okay.
Okay.
And there's you a difference between real world and test world.
Thanks very much.
I'd have to go into a 30-minute conversation with you about how is the lake structured, who built the lake. We're not going to go there. We ain't got time to. I love you, but we're not going there. For test purposes, you always own to the high water mark for littoral rights. Is everybody clear on that? Everybody needs to be very clear. So owner owns to the high water mark always on a test. Okay? That was good, Dia. Thank you for being the first. Certainly you won't be the last, I promise you.
Okay.
Okay. And thank you for being a good sport about it, too. Prior appropriation. I doubt this is on a test at all. This only happens out in the western part of the United States, and it basically says whoever got there first has rights to the waters. That's what they mean by first in time, first in rights. Whoever got there first, then that's who has rights to the water. I will tell you, if you knew anything about California, Arizona, Nevada, if you knew anything about, if you ever lived out there, you've probably heard of this because there's lawsuits about this all the time out there. So what had happened is that the pioneers went out there and they were the first to get there, and there's the water. Well, then towns started popping up, and then the towns started using more of the water than the owner wanted them to. Why? Because the owner was using it as irrigation for his farm. And so now the city was using more of the water, and the farmer couldn't irrigate his crops. So the question was, who really had rights to that water? The farmer did, because he got there first. So they have lawsuits about this all the time out west. We don't have that here in the eastern part of the United States. Usage of water in the eastern part of the United States goes by what is called reasonable. Reasonable is a term that was invented by lawyers and judges so that they would have a job. Because the word reasonable might be used one way in one lawsuit and totally different in another lawsuit. So it's left wide open. It is a very subjective word, can be used in a lot of different contexts, and that's why they have a job, is because of the word reasonable. And I will shut up and move on. So that is your third type of appurtenance. And then notice they've got the word appurtenance right here, and I told you it was out of place. All right. I've already given you a definition for appurtenance. My definition is any right, privilege, or improvement permanently attached to the land. Right? Now, they've got in the book here that an appurtenance runs with the land, and that is true. But it's very slang. So what does that mean? What that means is that when the land is sold, the appurtenance goes along with the sale. The only way the appurtenance would not go along with the sale if it was put in writing in a contract. And now we've learned what that in writing is called. It's either going to be in the deed or it's going to be in that property disclosure statement, which then becomes an exhibit to the sales contract. Okay? So you do want to know what runs with the land means. It means that that item is sold along with the sale of the land. Appurtenances go along with the sale of the land. In other words, y'all, if I own my house here, okay, the land that the house sits on, we're not going to do two different deeds. We're not going to do a deed for the land and a different deed for the house. We're going to do a deed for the land. The house is an appurtenance. It's an improvement on the land. And so appurtenances go along with the sale of the land. Therefore, we don't have to do a separate deed for the house. Does that make sense to everybody? It should. So the appurtenances run with the land. And then they mention easements. This always brings up just tons of questions I want to go ahead and tell you, please don't think I'm being rude here because I'm not. I'm not going to really entertain. I might entertain one or two questions about an easement. I doubt I answer them. Here's the deal. What I want you to know right now, number one, is the definition of an easement. And more importantly, I even want you to know that an easement is a type of appurtenance. And so, first, let me give you the definition, and then I'll have you write everything in order, okay? So, I'm getting ready to give you the definition of an easement. Are you ready? Here we go. An easement is a non exclusive, irrevocable right to use the property of another. To use the property of another. I'm going to repeat all of it. A non exclusive, irrevocable right to use the property of another. And all those words are so important. So, non exclusive, what does that mean? Even though I might give you the right to use my property, I also have the right to use it. Hell, y'all, I own it. All right? So, it's non if an easement was exclusive and I gave you the right to use it, then only you could use it if it was exclusive. See, easements are non exclusive. So, it's not just you that has the right, so do I. So they're non-exclusive and they're irrevocable. What does that mean? I better be very careful as to whom I give the right to, because once I give the right, I cannot take it back. That's what irrevocable means. You can't take it back. Ooh, you better be careful. Okay? So non-exclusive irrevocable right. Notice I didn't say privilege, I said right. Y'all, rights are extremely strong. Once you give a right, you ain't going to take it away. Nobody does. You can't. It's almost impossible. All right? So, in this case, it is impossible because we just said it's irrevocable. So, you have a right. The next word was to use. Notice I didn't say that I'm giving you the right to occupy my property. You can't stay there. You can't possess my property. You cannot occupy my property. But you do have the right to enter and leave my property. There's words for that, by the way. I think they're in the blue book, but I'll give them to you anyway. The right to enter, that word is called ingress. I-N-G-R-E-S-S. The right to exit my property is called egress. E-G-R-E-S-S. The right of ingress and the right of egress. The right to enter and the right to leave. You don't have the right to stay. You have the right to come through. You have the right to use it, but you don't have the right to occupy it. So a non-exclusive, irrevocable right to use the property of another. That's an easement. Now, we're going to get much more into it in depth later on in the course. We're going to learn there's different types of easements. There's easements in gross, there's appurtenant easements, so forth and so on. Okay, so, but for now, we're going to, one last thing we're going to write about easements. So we got a definition now. You're going to add to this and you're going to write, easements are types of appurtenances and are types of encumbrances. Easements are types of appurtenances and they are types of encumbrances. Encumbrances, E-N-C-R-U-M-B-R-A-N-C-E-S. I think I spelled that right. It's close enough. Encumbrances. So easements are types of appurtenances and types of encumbrances. And I know I'm going to have a lot of questions about easements. Please, let's try to hold those until we get, there's going to be 2 full pages on easements later on. And so, but Lee, why are they bringing it up now? They're bringing it up now because remember, these are types of appurtenances is what we're talking about. And so easements are types of appurtenances. Okay? I will stop here for a minute or two and I will allow any questions that you may have. So I'll do a quick review for you if you'd like. So what we've done so far, if we've discussed real estate and real property, there's a little bit of difference, but real property also includes the rights. It's not just the land and it's not just the improvements and rights. It's both. It's all of it, real property. And then we discussed these types of improvements and rights are also known as appurtenances. The rights, the surface, subsurface, and air, land, these two down at the bottom are appurtenances. Then we discuss the different types of appurtenances: fixtures, fructus naturalis, and water rights and easements. All right, now where we're going is to a book that you have called Georgia Principal's Real Estate Student Handout Book. So I'm going to call this the Handout Book. And we're on page 1 of the Handout Book. Hopefully you have this book. You should have this book. If you're sending somebody to pick up your textbook, tell them to pick this up too. It's called the Handbook. We discussed it this morning. And what this has in it is little quizzes about what we've already taught you. Okay? So on page 1 of the handbook, and by the way, if you don't have it, I think there's one in your materials section. So you can look at it. In other words, look in your control panel under the materials and look for handbook. Now you don't want to print that bad boy out because it's got a bunch of pages to it. So you might want to follow in just until you get one. It's page 172, or maybe they told you to print it out, but it's got a bunch of pages. On page 1, this is what you're looking at on the screen. I just want to do a screenshot, y'all. That'd probably be the easiest thing to do is just do a screenshot. By the way, do the screenshot before I show you the answer, because what you want to be able to do is study the material and then take these tests. I have some students that say, well, Lee, why don't you let us do them? Why don't you give us a couple of minutes to do these while we're in class? And I did a long, long time ago, but all you did was go back in the book and look up the answer. Y'all, that doesn't do you any good. Your tests that you take are not open book. And so what you want to do is study these once you have studied the material. That's why I told you this morning, this handbook, you don't want to go ahead of me for tomorrow in the handbook. You want to know and understand what we covered that day in the handbook. This is something you do every night, is you recover the handbook as to what we covered. And so you want to put your answers on another sheet of paper, have it somewhere else, so that when you take a screenshot of this, or if you printed it out, or if you got a book, you don't put the answers in the book, you put your answers somewhere else. Because maybe next week when you have some extra time, you want to come back and do these. And it'll help your recall. Okay? So, number 1 says each of the following is a test of whether or not something is a fixture except. And the correct answer is answer C.
Cost.
Right? Cost. What you pay for something has nothing to do with whether or not it's a fixture. And notice the big thing that's missing is one of the answers is a written agreement. Man, that's the best answer of anything you're going to see here. But they didn't have that as one of the answers. They had method of attachment, adaptability, and relationship of the parties, which all three are a test of whether or not something is a fixture. But what you pay for something has nothing to do with whether or not it's a fixture. Okay? So the key word in the question was accept, which one is not a test. Answer C. Number 2, which this one I actually do want you to do real fast without me telling you. So I'll give you about 10 seconds to do it. Ms. Satterfield, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted someone to answer the question.
Well, why don't you? Well, now that you got your microphone on,
All right.
I'll put you on the spot.
No problem. The answer is B.
As in dog?
No, B as in boy.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Very good. Yes, that is correct. I will tell you there are a lot of students that do answer the question as D as in dog, right? And the reason that you do is that you kind of might have read it a little bit too fast and you thought it said best definition of real estate. And if it would have said real estate or real property, the answer would have been D dog, right? But the question's asking which of the following is the best definition of just an appurtenance. And remember, an appurtenance is any right or improvement permanently attached to the land, and we said that it runs with the sale of the land. And that's what B says, items or rights that would ordinarily pass with the sale of real property. So the correct answer to number 2 is B beta. And you got to be a little careful. What is this trying to tell you? It's trying to tell you got to be very careful with each word that they use in the question. Because if you get down to D and you go, oh, that sounds good, land and improvements. Well, you answer this, is land a type of appurtenance? And the answer to that is no. Those are two different things. Now, when we add land and appurtenances together, we get real estate, right? But land is not a type of appurtenance. Remember, appurtenance is any rights or improvements, but the land itself is not a type of appurtenance. That's a good question right there. Okay. All right, page 14 and 15 in the textbook, going back to it. Physical and economic characteristics of land. So physically, what makes land land? Number 1, you can't pick it up and move it. Well, Lee, I see them do it all the time. They come in with bulldozers and then put it in a drag line, put it in a dump truck, and off it goes. Y'all, they're not moving land. The only thing they're moving is dirt. Dirt and land are two different things. They're not the same thing, right? Not even close to being the same thing. So if here is the property, right, you have property lines. These are your property lines. Let's say right here is the front street. Here's your property lines. If they a big hill back here in the back and they come and they remove the hill, did your property line go in the dump truck? No, the only thing that went in the dump truck is dirt. As y'all say, soil. In North Georgia, we just say soul. That's it. Just say soul. Down here, y'all say soil. Sound like y'all are saying cereal. For God's sake, it's a little word that don't need to put all that in it. This is salt. Okay, it's like oil. It's not oil. It's oil. Anyway, so you can't pick land up and move it. You can pick up dirt and move it, but you can't pick up and land and move it. So it's immobile. Can't pick it up and move it. Number 2, it's indestructible. That's true too. You cannot destroy land. Lee, what about these fires that we see all the time out in California and out especially California? That's because there are a bunch of idiots out in California. All you're seeing, this should be a crime. I'm just telling you, it should be a crime. Every time you turn on the television and you're seeing these fires just roar out in California, it is nothing but ignorance. It's worse than ignorance. It's total stupidity. This is all about some spotted owl. And there's such idiots out there, they care more about that owl than they do you. And so what you're watching is people's lives. They're dying in these fires. Their homes are being destroyed in these fires. And they won't do anything about it because they're worried about some owl. I'm going to tell you this, it's a good thing Lee Diddy does not live out in California, or you would see me on TV. And talk about protest, I would be protesting every day at the state capitol about how stupid they could possibly be, that they care more about an owl than they do me. They won't even do a controlled burn. That means that when the wind is not blowing out there, they would actually start a fire so that when a real fire does occur, it would only burn up to a point. They won't even do that. That's how stupid they are out there. It is amazing the ignorance that is happening. But you say, but Lee, isn't that destroying the land? And the answer to that is no, it's not destroying the land. As a matter of fact, it is actually fertilizing the land because fire is a natural fertilizer. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember Mount St. Helens. The whole side of the mountain blew off, volcano just popped it off, and the destruction, right? Did it really destroy? It actually didn't. It actually fertilized. If you look at it now, it is all green again. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. But you cannot destroy land. It's impossible. Next is non-homogeneity, heterogeneity. Let me even give you another word that's even better than that. Write it down. It's called unique. A physical characteristic of land means that there's not another one like it in the universe. And there's not. You might say, well, Lee, what about 2 acres tracts of land, 2 acres right beside each other in the salt flats? There's no difference between those 2 properties. Yes, there is, if for no other reason they're not located in the same spot. Right? Put a GPS on either one of those tracts of land, you're going to get a different GPS reading. Right? So every piece of property, every tract of land is unique to itself. There's not another one like it in the universe. And another word for unique is non-homogeneity or heterogeneity. And by the way, welcome to your first synonym, of which we're going to have tons of these throughout the course. All right, I mean tons of them. And I really wish that they wouldn't have 4 names for the same thing, but they do, and they even test you on it. So I hate that I have to tell you that there are 3 names for unique, but I'm telling you, and you might see it any one of the 3 ways on a test. Non-homogeneity, heterogeneity, or unique. So physically, that's what makes land land. Then the next question is what gives land worth? Okay? Economic characteristics of land. And we're going to change the location of these because I want the second one to be at the top. Because the most important of these 4 is called situs. And another word for situs, birthday, is location. Right? If I have this little bitty brick ranch home, tiny little 2-bedroom home, 1-bath home, and if I've got that house located in Canton, Georgia, versus in, are you familiar with downtown Atlanta, Ansley Park? Right? That same home located in Ansley Park, which one's going to draw a higher price? Ansley Park. Y'all, that location is worth more, even though the house is the same house. Where it's located has everything to do with its economic value. And so situs, which is another word for locate, you've heard this before. It's all about what? Location, location, location. Well, it is. That's what real estate's all about. Where's it located? McDonald's is not a hamburger joint. McDonald's is a real estate company. You talk about the number one, they own more real estate, they own more valued real estate than any other company in the world. To them, it's not so much how good is the hamburger, but where's the joint located, right? That's the ticket for them. They have the best locations of any other company in the whole wide world. So it's really not a hamburger joint so much as it location, 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 situs, situs, situs. Okay? These others take a little bit of explanation, and we're at a time now that we need to take our 15-minute break. We're at 2:30, so actually 2:31. So I'll put the timer on. Somebody didn't know what it was earlier. So it's a countdown for when we start class back again. I will say this before I do it. Does anybody have any questions so far? Is everybody good so far? Any questions whatsoever? Anybody got their hand up? Somebody does. Teresa, what you got?
I just wanted to know, do we have to sign out when we take the breaks and re-sign back in? Because I didn't last time.
No.
Okay.
No, the best thing to do is leave your computer on, because if you sign out of that thing, who knows if you can get signed back in. Y'all leave that thing going. Definitely leave it going. I would. I guarantee you I'd leave it going.
Appreciate that. So,
yes,
like in the mornings when we start all over again, going through our email?
Yes, that's how I would do it. I'd go through your email and sign back in tomorrow morning. Exactly.
I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. That was an excellent question. I think everybody needed to know that. I feel bad that I didn't tell you that. That was a wonderful question. Excellent question. Keep that thing on, y'all. Remember, that's one of the ways it keeps up with your time. Don't forget the other thing is your attentiveness. So be careful with what you're looking at on the computer. All right, so I'm going to start the clock if there's no more questions. So here we go. See you in 15. I'm going to step away, okay? So here we go.
Hey, anybody still tuned in? I was just curious. I'm making sure he didn't say anything about any homework yet, right?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay. I was just double checking because I'm like, he said he's going to say it throughout the day. I know he's been giving his little hints about the test, but I haven't heard anything specific about it.
Got everything he says, but like you said, it goes pretty quick, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
If someone could rank the homework daily in our Facebook group, that would be awesome. I'm asking.
Great idea. Post that on the Facebook page. I think we should start the file.
Okay. Quick question. This to end the conversation here. If I log out for lunch, is that going to hurt me? An hour? Anybody there? Just if you said if you did or didn't log out. Yeah, if I logged out at lunchtime, it looked like I was not getting that hour. No, I think you could log out. I just think that the issue was when you log back in to make sure that you're being counted for. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that made me nervous. Yeah, I would just stay in and just like turn my computer on sleep or something. Okay. Thank you.
I did say that I was going to ask if they give us some type of notification or possibly let us know when we are using time, because I would hate to just be sitting here in front of the computer, you know what I mean, doing work, and they're assuming that, oh, she's not paying attention or something because the computer went to sleep. You don't want to lose minutes every day, and next thing you know, you got to, you know what I mean? It's like it makes me a little nervous because I'm wondering, is there some type of way that they would let you know if about 20 minutes of your 30 minutes is gone, or you know what I mean?
My computer didn't go to sleep at all. Like, even if I wasn't like directly in front of it, as long as I had the screen up, it didn't go to sleep. Because I thought that too. I was like, what if I run upstairs to use the bathroom and my computer go to sleep? But for some reason, as long as I kept the viewing this, screen up, my computer stayed awake.
Mine did too, for the most part. I might have to tap my mouse every blue moon, but it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, they do have apps. And we used to. I know this, not for this. I know this from work. There's like programs that you can buy, like caffeine for your computer, so that it won't go to sleep, so that it looks like you're working all day long. So I'm sure you could use something like that for this as well, but not to teach you how to get by with the minutes, but just saying.
Right. Okay.
She out here giving pointers on how to cheat the system. No. We use it for work. Have any of y'all taken the online class, like the actual real estate online, the self-taught course?
I'm sorry, we are currently experiencing system problems.